When the village healer finally opened the clay pot that Adana had been hiding beneath her sleeping mat, his face went white as clouds. He dropped the lid immediately, his hands trembling like leaves in storm wind. He would not speak of what he saw inside, could not speak of it. He only whispered 3 words that made Adana's blood run cold. "What have you done?" And in that moment, she understood. She finally understood what she had been washing at the river every morning for 3 moons. What she had been feeding her dying father. What the meat really was. Adana was born in the small village of Kibwe, where the river ran clear and the forest stood thick with secrets. She was a girl of 17 harvests, with skin smooth as river stones and eyes that held the gentleness of morning mist. Her body was lean from years of hard work, her hands calloused from pounding yam in the wooden mortar. She wore a simple wrapper of faded indigo cloth, threadbare at the edges, and a head wrap that had once belonged to her mother. Around her waist hung a string of cowrie shells, the only inheritance her mother had left before the fever took her 3 harvests past. Adana lived alone with her father, Okonkwo, in a small compound at the edge of the settlement. He had been a strong farmer once, a man whose yam mounds were the envy of every household. But sickness had found him 2 seasons ago, a wasting sickness that made his flesh melt away like palm oil in the sun. His skin hung loose on bones that seemed to grow sharper each day. He could no longer work the fields, could no longer even rise from his sleeping mat without help. The villagers whispered about them. Of course they whispered. At the market, women selling their cassava and dried fish would stop their trading to watch Adana pass. "That poor girl," they would say, shaking their heads while adjusting their wrappers. "Working herself to death for a father who will not recover. The spirits have marked him for the ancestors." The elders who gathered under the great Iroko tree would nod in agreement. "A daughter's devotion is beautiful," they said, "but devotion cannot fight what the gods have decided." Adana heard every word, every pitying glance, every whispered prediction of her father's death, but she refused to accept it. She would save him. She had to save him. He was all she had left in this world. She worked like 3 women combined. She farmed their small plot of land, though the yam harvest was always poor without her father's strong hands. She wove baskets from raffia to sell at the market, her fingers bleeding from the rough fibers. She fetched water from the river before dawn and after dusk. She pounded yam until her arms screamed with exhaustion. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Her father needed medicine. He needed proper food. He needed meat to build his strength, and meat cost more than a poor orphan girl could ever earn. For 3 moons, Adana watched her father fade away like smoke dissolving into sky. His eyes grew distant. His voice became a whisper. His body shrank until he looked like a bundle of sticks wrapped in skin. And Adana felt desperation eating at her soul like termites devouring wood from the inside. Then, one night when the moon was dark and the village slept, Adana walked to the forbidden forest, the place where the ancient spirits dwelled, the place where no villager dared go after sunset. She walked until she reached the oldest tree, a massive Iroko that had stood there since before the village was born. And she did what desperate daughters do. She called out to whatever power might be listening. "Please," she whispered into the darkness. "Please, I will give anything. Do anything. Just save my father. Just let him live." The forest answered. From the shadows between the trees, an old woman appeared. An elder with hair white as cotton, skin wrinkled like dried riverbed, and eyes that glowed with light that had no source. She wore a wrapper of deepest black, and around her neck hung beads that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The old woman smiled, and in that smile was something ancient and terrible and knowing. "I have heard your prayer, daughter," the old woman said, her voice echoing as if coming from deep within the earth. and I will grant it. Your father will live. He will grow strong again. But there is a price." "Anything," Adana said without hesitation. "I will pay any price." The old woman's smile widened. "Every morning you will find meat at the base of this tree, fresh meat, warm meat, enough to feed your father and restore his strength. But you must never question where it comes from. You must never speak of this gift to anyone, and you must never ever refuse it. Do you understand?" Adana nodded, too desperate to think clearly, too frightened to ask questions. Yes, I understand." "Good," the old woman whispered. And then she was gone, dissolved into shadow, as if she had never been there at all. The next morning, before the first rooster crowed, Adana walked to the forbidden forest, and there, at the base of the ancient Iroko tree, she found it. A clay pot covered with woven raffia. Inside was meat, red, fresh meat that was still warm to the touch, more meat than she had seen in months. Her hands shook as she lifted the pot. Her mind whispered questions she refused to hear. She carried the pot to the river, far from the village where no one would see. And there, kneeling on the smooth river stones, she washed the meat, scrubbed it clean in the cold morning water. And as she washed, she noticed things that made her stomach twist. The texture was strange. The smell was familiar in a way she could not name. The way it felt in her hands reminded her of something she did not want to remember. But she pushed those thoughts away, buried them deep. Her father needed this meat. He needed to live. And the old woman had said never to question the gift. That evening, Adana prepared the meat with pepper and palm oil. She made a rich soup that filled their small compound with smells that made her father sit up for the first time in weeks. He ate. He ate like a man starving, and Adana watched with joy as color returned to his face, as strength returned to his movements. The villagers noticed immediately. Within 3 days, word spread through the settlement like fire through dry grass. Women at the market whispered in amazement. "Did you see Okonkwo?" they said, balancing clay pots of water on their heads. "He was walking yesterday, walking without help. How is this possible?" The men drinking palm wine under the great tree shook their heads in wonder. "The girl must have found a powerful healer," they muttered, "or the spirits have shown mercy." But there were other whispers too, darker whispers. "Where does she get the meat?" some asked. "A poor girl with no money, yet every morning she goes to the river with her basket, and inside is fresh meat, always fresh, always warm." The village healer, an old man named Ekwueme who knew herbs and spirits, watched Adana with eyes that held suspicion. But he said nothing. Not yet. For 3 moons, Adana continued her morning ritual. Every dawn, before the village woke, she walked to the forbidden forest. Every morning, the clay pot waited for her at the base of the ancient tree. Every morning, she carried it to the river and washed the meat in the cold water. And every evening, her father ate and grew stronger. But every morning, as Adana knelt by the river washing the meat, something inside her grew heavy. Heavy with questions she would not ask. Heavy with knowledge she would not acknowledge. The meat felt wrong in her hands. The smell reminded her of things she tried not to think about. And sometimes, when she looked at the water running red around the meat, she saw shapes in the current. Shapes that looked almost like fingers, almost like toes. She pushed those thoughts away, buried them deeper. Her father was alive. That was all that mattered. In the village, strange things began to happen. The trader from the neighboring settlement, a man who passed through Kibwe every month with his goods, did not arrive. His family came searching, their faces tight with fear. "Has anyone seen him?" they asked. "He came this way 3 weeks ago and never returned." The villagers shook their heads. No one had seen him. Then the fisherman, young Chidi, who everyone knew, did not return from the river one night. They found his basket by the water's edge. his fishing net still in the current. But Chidi himself was gone, vanished like morning mist under the sun. The whispers in the village changed, became darker, more frightened. "Something is hunting in the forest," the elders said, gathering under the great tree with faces grave. "Something that takes men who travel alone." Women began walking in groups. Children were forbidden from playing near the forest edge, and every household offered sacrifices to the ancestors, begging for protection. Through it all, Adana continued her morning ritual. The clay pot appeared. She carried it to the river. She washed the meat. She fed her father, and he grew stronger and stronger until he looked almost as he had before the sickness found him. But Adana herself was changing. Her sleep was filled with dreams that made her wake gasping. Dreams of the forest, dreams of shadows with teeth, dreams of meat that whispered names she recognized. She grew thin, though there was always enough food. Her eyes developed dark circles like bruises. And when she washed the meat at the river, her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the clay pot. The village healer, Ekweme, watched her with eyes that saw too much. One morning, he came to the river just as Adana was finishing her washing. He stood on the bank above her, silent as stone. And when Adana looked up and saw him there, fear gripped her heart like a fist. "Every morning you come here," Ekweme said quietly. His voice was not unkind, but it held a weight that made Adana's blood run cold. "Every morning with your basket, every morning washing meat that a poor girl should not have." "My father needs to eat," Adana whispered, clutching her basket to her chest. "He is getting well." "Yes," Ekweme said. "I have noticed. Your father grows strong while men disappear from the village. Strange, is it not? This coincidence?" "I know nothing about the missing men," Adana said. And it was true. She knew nothing. She only suspected, only feared, only dreamed terrible dreams she could not speak aloud. Ekweme descended the riverbank slowly, his old bones careful on the stones. He came close to Adana, close enough that she could see the ancient wisdom in his eyes, close enough that she could not look away. "Child," he said, and his voice was gentle now, sad. "Where does this meat come from?" "A gift," Adana whispered. Her voice broke like dry wood snapping. "From the forest spirits, to heal my father." "Spirits," Ekweme repeated. He reached out and lifted the clay pot from her basket. Adana tried to pull away, but her arms had no strength. The healer looked inside. His face changed in ways that made Adana want to run and never stop running. "Child," he said again, and now his voice shook. "Do you know what this is?" "Meat," Adana said, but the word felt like a lie in her mouth. "Just meat." "This is not from any animal the hunters know," Ekweme said. He set the pot down as if it burned his hands. "This is not goat, not bush rat, not even bush pig. Where did you really get this?" And Adana could not answer, could not speak, because if she spoke the truth, she would have to acknowledge what she had been doing, what she had been feeding her father, what she had become. Ekweme looked at her for a long moment. Then he said the words that shattered her carefully built wall of denial. "Has your father asked what he has been eating?" And in that moment, everything Adana had been refusing to see came crashing down on her like a calabash falling from a great height. She looked at the meat in the pot, really looked at it for the first time. And she saw what she had been seeing all along but refusing to acknowledge. The texture that was too familiar. The smell that reminded her of something she knew too well. The shape beneath the surface that was almost like a hand, almost like a foot, almost like something that should never be in a cooking pot. Adana vomited into the river. Her body heaved until there was nothing left inside her but horror and shame and understanding that came too late. Too terribly late. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Oh, ancestors, what have I done?" That evening, Adana could not prepare the meat, could not touch it, could not even look at it. Her father, strong now and hungry, demanded to know why there was no soup. "Where is the meat?" he asked. "Why do you not cook?" Adana looked at him, looked at the father she loved more than life itself, the father she had saved, and she could not tell him the truth, could not destroy him with the knowledge of what he had been eating, what she had been feeding him. "I am not well," she lied. "I cannot cook tonight." Her father grumbled, but accepted this. He did not know, did not understand. And Adana was grateful for that, even as guilt ate at her soul like maggots consuming flesh. That night, Adana did what she should have done 3 moons ago. She returned to the forbidden forest, to the ancient Iroko tree where the old woman had first appeared, and she called out with a voice that held all her anguish and rage and horror. "Come out!" she screamed into the darkness. "Come out and face me! I know what you have done. I know what you made me do." The old woman appeared, stepping from shadow as if she had been waiting there all along. Her smile was the same, ancient and terrible and knowing. "So," she said, "you finally see the truth." "You tricked me," Adana cried. Tears streamed down her face like rain falling on dry earth. "You made me feed my father. You made me—" She could not say it, could not speak the horror aloud. "I made you nothing," the old woman said, and her voice was hard as stone now, cold as river water in the deep season. "I offered you a choice. You chose to save your father. You chose to take the meat. You chose never to ask questions. These were your choices, daughter, not mine." "But the missing men," Adana whispered. "The trader, the fisherman. What happened to them?" The old woman's smile widened. "The forest takes what it needs, and you accepted what the forest provided. This is the bargain you made. This is the price you agreed to pay." "I did not know," Adana screamed. "I did not understand." "You knew," the old woman said quietly. "You have always known, from the very first morning when you washed the meat and felt how wrong it was, when you smelled it and recognized something familiar. You knew, daughter. You simply chose not to see, because seeing would mean admitting what you had become, what you had done." And Adana fell to her knees because the old woman spoke the truth. She had known. In her heart, in her soul, she had known from the beginning. But she had buried that knowledge beneath layers of desperate love and willful ignorance. She had chosen not to see, chosen not to question, chosen to save her father at any cost, without counting what that cost might be. "What do I do now?" Adana whispered. "How do I live with this? How do I face my father, face the village, face myself?" The old woman looked at her with eyes that held neither pity nor judgment, only ancient understanding. "You will live with it the way all humans live with the consequences of their choices. You will carry this weight for the rest of your days, and perhaps, in carrying it, you will learn what your desperate love cost. Not just the missing men, whose families still weep for them, but your own soul, which you traded away for a few more moons of your father's life." "I only wanted to save him," Adana sobbed. "I only wanted him to live." "Yes," the old woman said. "But at what price, daughter? At what price?" And then she was gone, dissolved into shadow, leaving Adana alone with her horror and her guilt and her understanding that came too late. Adana returned to the village as dawn was breaking. She went directly to the healer Ekweme's compound. She fell at his feet and confessed everything. The bargain with the old woman, the clay pot that appeared each morning, the meat she had been washing at the river, the terrible truth she had finally acknowledged. Ekweme listened in silence. His face showed no surprise, no shock, only deep, deep sadness. "I suspected," he said when she finished. "But I hoped I was wrong. What will you do now, child?" I do not know, Adana whispered. I cannot undo what was done. Cannot bring back the men I helped destroy. Cannot take away what I fed my father. What do I do? The old healer was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You will tell your father the truth, all of it. He has a right to know what price was paid for his life. And then you will leave this village. You cannot stay here, child, not after what you have done. The families of the missing men deserve justice, but justice would mean your death. So you will leave. Go far from here and spend the rest of your life trying to atone for what your desperate love created. And so Adana did, as the healer advised. That morning she sat with her father in their small compound, and she told him everything. Everything. The forbidden forest, the old woman, the clay pot, the meat, the missing men, the terrible price that was paid so that he could live. Her father listened without speaking. His face changed as understanding came, changed as horror replaced joy, changed as he realized what he had been eating for 3 moons, what his daughter had done to save him. He looked at his strong arms, his healthy body, his restored life, and he wept like a man whose soul had been torn in two. I did not know, he whispered. Oh, daughter, I did not know. I know, Adana said, but the knowing does not change what happened, does not bring back the men who are gone, does not wash clean what we have done. That day, Adana left the village of Kibwe. She carried nothing but a small bundle of her mother's belongings and the weight of her terrible choices. The villagers watched her go in silence. Some faces held pity, some held hatred. Most held relief that the darkness was leaving their village. Her father remained behind, a man marked by knowledge he could never escape. He told the village elders what had happened, told the families of the missing men the truth, though it destroyed him to speak it. Some wanted to kill him for what he had unknowingly consumed. But the healer Ekweme stood between them and mercy. He did not know, Ekweme said. His guilt is real, but his crime was ignorance. His daughter has already gone. She has taken the greater burden with her. Let him carry his own weight. That is punishment enough. And so Okonkwo lived, but his life was a living death. He could never eat meat again without remembering, could never see his reflection without seeing what he had become. The villagers avoided him. Children ran when he approached. Women covered their faces when he passed. As for Adana, she wandered from village to village, settlement to settlement, never staying long. Wherever she went, she told her story, told it as a warning, told it as a confession. She worked in the fields for food. She slept beneath trees. She lived with the weight of what her desperate love had created. And in every village where she stopped, she would say the same words. I loved my father more than life itself. And in trying to save him, I became something worse than death. I took the easy path, the desperate path, the path that did not ask questions because I feared the answers, and innocent men died because of my willful blindness. The story of Adana spread through the land like ripples in water. Mothers told it to their daughters, elders told it to the young, and the lesson was always the same. Love that destroys others is not love. Devotion that requires innocent blood is not devotion. Salvation that costs innocent lives is not salvation. And desperate bargains made in darkness always carry prices too terrible to pay. When we face desperate times, we must still choose carefully, must still ask questions, must still count the cost. Because some prices are too high, even for those we love most, even for those we would die to save. Adana learned this truth too late, but perhaps in the telling of her story, others will learn it in time. Will learn that there are lines we must not cross, gifts we must not accept, bargains we must not make, no matter how desperate we become, no matter who we are trying to save. And so they learned that desperate love without wisdom becomes destruction, that ignorance chosen is still guilt, that some debts can never be repaid, only carried. and that the weight of wrong choices follows us always, like a shadow that grows longer as the sun sets. The end.